Today's presentation is part of an occasional series hosted by the Smithsonian Center for Education and Museum Studies, the Smithsonian Heritage Month Steering Committee, and for today, also the National Museum of African Art. Heritage programming at the Smithsonian for this year and for next year as well is sponsored by Target. The purpose of our lecture series is to present really exciting work done by colleagues across the country in heritage programming and cultural programming. So today we're very excited to have Dr. Felicia McMahon, who is a research professor of anthropology at Syracuse University, and Benjamin Kamar Virgilio, who's a student at the State University of New York at Oswego studying criminal justice, and he'll graduate next May. So we're just very excited to have them here to talk about, they're a really wonderful example for us of what you can do when you're doing community and heritage programming that really supports the communities that you're working with, and what we could be doing, or folklife people definitely are, and what we can do through our work to support the various communities in our own neighborhoods. So Faye will begin talking, and she'll introduce Benjamin some more. They together will talk about their work, and then afterwards they'll take questions, and then after that we'll have a tea and book signing over in that area. Also at the end, if you do come up to look at the cows that they will tell you more about, please just be sure not to touch them because they're very fragile. So that's it. Please turn off your cell phones and join me in giving a very warm welcome to Faye and Benjamin.
Philippa, thank you for inviting Benjamin and me to talk about our collaboration on traditional arts for recently resettled Sudanese young adults in Syracuse, New York. Since 2001, I have had the honor of being a student of DiDinga and Dinka community members in Syracuse who are known in the media as the Lost Boys of Sudan. You're probably familiar with their history. These young people were separated from their families at a very early age because of the protracted civil war in Sudan, and Benjamin's going to talk about that in a few minutes. In Syracuse, where we live, there's a growing community of Sudanese families, mostly Dinka people, and a smaller group of DiDinga, like Benjamin. However, the Lost Boys and Lost Girls are a distinct community of experience rather than one ethnic group. The Dinka and DiDinga are two separate cultures, and we have other ethnic groups from Sudan in Syracuse as well, but the media has lumped these young people together and refers to them by the moniker of Lost Boys and Lost Girls of Sudan. But they have very different languages and very different traditions. However, the Lost Boys and Lost Girls of Sudan, they do share a unique history because they spent years in refugee camps or missionary schools without their parents or elders. Their cultural traditions are preserved in their memories from their childhood and are only now reemerging in the United States. As a scholar of folklore, I view tradition as a dynamic process central to the concept of cultural democracy. And the eminent folklorist Henry Glassy has written, "If tradition is a people's creation out of their own past, its character is not stasis but continuity. Its opposite is not change but oppression, the intrusion of a power that thwarts the course of development. Oppressed people are made to do what others will them to do. Acting traditionally, by contrast, they use their own resources, their own tradition, one might say, to create their own future, to do what they themselves want to do." Disenfranchised people like the Dinka and DiDinga come from fragmented societies torn apart by war, and they arrive in the United States without social networks to sustain them. Refugees relocated to a new country are always in danger of losing their cultural identity and their children disconnected from their historical roots and culture, which affects self-image, a major factor in successful adjustment to the school system of the host country. It has been shown that traditional arts aid in the reconstitution of community and help individuals to heal as well as to recover community through the celebration of sacred and secular rituals, albeit reinterpreted and reformulated to fit the new circumstances. It's also been shown that cultural knowledge serves as a catalyst for community reconstitution, and traditional arts play a major role in this process. Public performances of dances, songs, crafts enable evolving communities to connect to the greater American society, because performance in public spaces implies mainstream acceptance. In essence, traditional arts they both bond members of an ethnic community and provide bridges to other communities so newcomers can become participants rather than spectators in civic life. At this point, I'd like to pause so you have the opportunity to hear from Benjamin, who can share his story with you and what he has done to help his DiDinga group to reclaim and to reshape their new national identity. Benjamin.
Why is everybody looking at me? I know maybe, some of you will be like, is he nervous? Damn right, I'm nervous. But I'm gonna try to shake it off, yeah. Anyway, I'm just gonna, tell you guys about my life stories and how I end up into the United States, and probably we'll kick off from there. Okay. My name is Benjamin Virgilio, and I was born and raised in a small village in southern part of Sudan called Lorema. As life went by, I know most of you probably know the war that has been going on in Sudan for a while, and so I was part of those who are affected by the war. And as time went by, actually, the war actually reached our village, and life became so hard for us, for everybody else. And my dad was so nervous that because my life was in danger, plus the other siblings of mine. So he thought, being there and just sitting and, with all these other cultural differences that was going on within our village, he thought that was a little bit too much for us. So he thought and every time, we'll be like, we'll be attacked by, the rebels and everybody who are involved by the communal clashes. Life was a little bit more miserable. So he thought of, taking us out of the country. So me, my sisters, and my brother, 5 of us plus my cousin, my dad actually, decided to take us out of the country. So we end up in the neighboring country, which is Kenya. I don't know if some of you have, are familiar with the map and everything. Kenya is a neighboring country from Sudan, and we just right at the border, and so we managed to cross the border, and right at the border we were received by the United Nations, and we were given like water, something to eat, and we stayed there for a while, and but still life wasn't, our future was not certain yet. So it's still, life was so hard. And so my dad actually found a way of, he talked to this other person, and he knew of this missionary nun from Germany. Her name is Sister Louise. So through that, he was able to find a connection of how we're gonna be transferred from United Nations refugee camp, which was so concentrated, and life was hard there because all you had was like a mixture of this corn meal, and you could just take it the whole day, with a glass of water, and that's how you are supposed to be surviving on that. To some of you, that it's just something unimaginable, but it's real, and it's what I went through, and life was hard. So he actually found a way through, and we end up with this missionary lady in Kenya. Her name is Sister Louise, and she put us into school and everything. And in 2001, we started this process. She found this process through the United States, some of the United States government program. It was a program whereby these marginalized young boys and girls could find a resettlement here in the United States. So with that, we started the process, and there went the September 11. Our process was delayed. It was delayed. We thought for some reason it was canceled. So we were just, waiting miserably, waiting to go to this United States land of milk and honey. As this is referred, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm a little bit nervous. So we waited for our process, and finally came up in. It was delayed for a year. So we have to be, we're just waiting, and hopefully something will happen. So finally, we checked. One day, I was just going to check the flight at the embassy, and I was so lucky and excited to find my name and other siblings listed there who were lucky to to board the plane. So there we go. We were in 2003. That was in December. So we board a plane, and then he's like, I don't think so. Has any one of you traveled out of the United States to Africa, perhaps? How many hours? 17. But I'm from down Kenya. That was like 19 hours flight plus 3 waiting hours, a total of 21 hours. So we started this long journey all the way to Europe, Brussels. That's in Europe. Then from Europe to United States. And then the worst thing ever happened to me. I was so terrified. When I arrived at O'Hare, that was Chicago Airport. Saw this, see this blizzard snow, something I've never seen. I'll be sincere. I was ready to take, to go live my miserable life, but, I was like, no way. And I saw these people just walking around, they don't care. And I was like, how do these people live in this kind of weather? So for some reason, I was like, nah, they must have some other secret. They were just walking, because our regional plane was just somewhere there, and we were supposed to go and board the plane, this regional, to come to Syracuse, right? And people are just walking. And, the good thing, it was just a short distance. I managed to go and, survive. I was so happy to reach there. That was the worst moment ever in my life, because I was like, no way. It's even worse than living in a fridge, inside the fridge. So I was so terrified. Anyway, we made it to Syracuse, and life went on. And in Syracuse, I started. We were provided with what? Food stamp. We were given food stamp for 2.5 months. Then we were paid rent, and we were told to live on your own. Then I had to look for a job. From there, I had to look for a job. I secured a job at a factory. Yeah. So we were baking breads at the factory, too hot at summer. Can you imagine working at a bakery, just, making all these breads? Plus, at the same time, I had to go to school. So, but I couldn't find, the schedule for the bakery was not, I had a conflict with my school schedule, so I had to do, night classes from the factory. I'll go to school direct to community college. So I have to wake up at around 4 o'clock go to a factory, just work there. I go take this night classes, which is equivalent to 3 credits, night lecture. So tired, I just go there, take my notes, and go ride a bus home. Life was hard. Life was hard. I did that for the last 2 years, and I decided, I need to do something better. So I dropped out of work, and I transferred my credit to the State University of Oswego. That's where I am right now, with my final year. I'm a senior, actually, anticipating to graduate in May. So arriving in Syracuse was something great for us and everything else. And when I arrived in Syracuse, our group we had like almost like eight or 10 DiDinga, right? And yeah, we be practicing this our cultural dance, which is in Nakoro for a while. And when I arrived in Syracuse, I met this special lady right here who for some reason I call her. She's like my mom because she take me everywhere. She be taking me everywhere and teaching me all the American culture and everything. Indian nation. Oh, you know where we have been. We came too far from this. So I met her, and she's just a very. She has a heart of, in other words, in Africa, I would say she has a heart of a lion because she can take anything, any kind of joke, bad or whatever. She take it all. She just, so, for some reason, she's like my second mom, So having met her was something great because she started, searching for places for us to perform our traditional dance. I've never thought, even when I came up, I never thought I was going to be allowed to perform a traditional dance here in the United States. There in my country I am, because that's how I'm being identified back home. But I never thought ever that I would be allowed to. Someone was going to let me perform, because that's how I'm being identified. It's culture. It's what I embrace. It's what I live for. So she found these places, and me and her, we'd be like collaborating, just like looking for a place, and she would be searching for a place. Like we've done more than dances, more than 10 dances, and she's been there for us, and she just go talk to some people, find a space, we go perform, and it's just a beautiful thing for us. And even when we send some of our pictures home, and we tell them that in the United States we are being allowed to perform our tradition, and they don't believe it. They're like, really? How? And they just don't get it. And so it's something that I know to some of you it might just mean nothing, but to us it really means something to perform, especially to an audience, to teach American culture. It's something that we always we treasure. I know it might mean something to you, but to us it's a great deal. So through her work, we are able to introduce ourselves as a new immigrant. We are able to introduce ourselves to American culture and tell them that, okay, this is who we are. Because some of you probably, just know Africa is, like it's not because you don't know, just, I don't know how to put it, but most of us, here in the United States, the way I saw, as I get assimilated into this culture, some of us just think Africa is it's a bunch of a community, they just don't know. People do have like different cultures and, how they are being identified and everything, right? And so to be given this chance here and to introduce ourselves as a new members of the community in the United States and perform in such kind of places like Syracuse University, most of the places we've been through, it's just a great deal, and we appreciate that, and that's something that we have to say thank you to American. Thank you for bringing me to the worst snow places. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. And so it's been a great deal to us, and without going any further, normally I like engaging myself through question and everything. I'm going to stop here and we're gonna see like a little clip of a collabo. This was a video done in a local television. We were just, trying to teach the American, our way of life and everything. So he's gonna show us a little clip on, and after that, Faye will come and talk for a while, and we will open the room for any kind of question. All right?
Well, this weekend, the dance and traditions of new immigrants in Central New York will be celebrated in downtown Syracuse. Here to give us a taste, literally and figuratively, is folklorist Felicia McMahon and Benjamin Virgilio of the DiDinga community in southern Sudan. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, George.
For the view, we've got some food to talk about in just a minute, but tell me about this festival. It's a great way for Central New York to get to know some of the new immigrants that have come to this community.
Yes, I want to stress, George, that these new communities come here as refugees because in their homelands they are experiencing war or genocide. And this festival on October 27th is actually a form of cultural intervention.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way to facilitate the safeguarding and the revitalization of traditions of some of our most vulnerable populations in Central New York.
And you talk about traditions. As a folklorist, that's obviously what you study, traditions. And what you do at this festival is bring together all these communities to share something that is important to them, and dance is one of those things.
Yes, dance, song, and also we have some crafts that will be demonstrated. And there are 6 cultures, 6 new communities. We have first the Bosnian community, and then we have 2 youth groups. One youth group from Liberia, another from Congo, and then also we have the Karen people of Burma, Myanmar, and we have Ahiska Turks of Russia, and also Benjamin's community, the DiDinga of South Sudan.
And Benjamin, certainly the DiDinga, tell us about the DiDinga community.
DiDinga community is actually the most marginalized community in my country. Actually, it's the very tiniest. The population is about like 500,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
It's very tiny, and we're located somewhere between the Kenya, between the Kenya border. We're right at the border, and we're a very, very marginalized community, and it's a very rich culturally community, and we value our culture so much in our dancing.
In fact, you say you say you value your culture and your dances, and one of the dances that you perform will be demonstrated this Saturday, and we have a little look at, describe the dance.
Actually, the dance is Nakorot, and Nakorot is actually our cultural dance, and it's the way how the community communicate, and it's actually, it's a very, very, very valuable dance in our country and in my community, and actually it's how we communicate generally, it's how our community communicate. Like for instance, let's say that there's like a voice in a community and somebody want to pass a message or communicate something to a community, we will normally go to a composer, and a composer will compose a song to talk about the problems that are going on in the community. For instance, the drought, we will compose a song about the drought, and it's just a very, very, very diverse dance.
And that, the Nicaragua dance, you saw the girls jump into the guys at the end.
That one is called Padan.
Padan, okay. And what are they, is that getting together, is that dating? What's happening there?
It's just a way of showing love for each other.
Okay. So when we see the football players jump up and chest, we see something like that. All right. All right. The other thing that draws people together is traditional food. And we have some of the traditional food of the DiDinga. And what's interesting is when you think about this history in this country, how some of that food is here. I know this is an important part that you wanted to bring up too.
I think it's going to be very obvious that there there's a strong connection with African food, such as DiDinga food, and African American foodways, because the ingredients and the way that Benjamin has cooked this food today is very obvious to me.
All right, so describe the traditional food, Benjamin, right there, what is that?
This is actually okra, and we call it in my native language, it's called weka.
Weka.
And with it is a goat meat, and normally we keep a lot of goats, and that's why it's a cheap meat down there, you know. Cows are a little bit rare because they're expensive a little bit. So basically we normally, we basically eat a lot of goat around there.
Goat, so this is goat
This is
and okra.
goat meat and okra. So, and some other spices and ingredients, and right here is a hat.
A hat.
A hat. This is a cornmeal.
And would you consider the hot cornmeal pretty much of a staple in the...
Actually, this one is, what I found out is almost like half of the African countries, like almost every community eat.
Almost every, and they may call it something different,
Yeah,
but
they might call it different,
it's
but
cornmeal.
It's cornmeal.
And
I found out that almost every community, this is their staple food.
this is the staple
Yeah,
food.
it's fine, yeah. For some reason, a long time ago, I thought maybe it's only our DiDinga community food.
Right,
but
right.
I just found out that it's like all over Africa, it's like everyone's favorite.
And then, of course, collard greens.
Yeah.
We say more.
So a hat is actually, you know, you actually eat a hat accompanied by either the corn, the weka, and beef.
You can, the same recipe, we have it on our website.
Yeah.
You could substitute the goat for
Yeah.
beef if you want to.
Yeah.
Probably a lot may want to
Yeah.
do that because they're not used to it. But you see a lot of Jamaican recipes, curried goat. You see a lot of Jamaican, so you can see the whole, for you as a folklorist,
Yes,
you see the whole
absolutely.
travel from the continent through the Americas. And then this is collard greens.
This collard green, actually, we call it hapoof and
Hapoof.
hapoof, yeah.
Okay.
Could I just say, I watched Benjamin cutting the collard greens, and it was the same way that you and I discussed. You said in your family that the collard greens are
Rolled.
Yes.
And then
they're
chopped.
finely chopped, and he was doing that, but he's never been to your family in the United States. He's only been, you know, that was his tradition. I'd also like to say that I see that foodways are the traditions that last the longest. Language is the first to go, but foodways stay with us the longest of any of our traditions.
All right, we're gonna taste some of this food, but you know what? We gotta tell folks that you can do all of this Saturday at the Refugee and New Immigrant Festival. It's gonna be October the 27th. That's this Saturday at the Warehouse, 350 West Fayette Street from noon to 5. Dance, food, culture, free!
And it's free.
All right. Thank you, Faye. Thank you, Benjamin. We're gonna taste this in just a moment. Stay with Food for Thought. We'll be right back. There we are. How you doing?
By the way, that festival was funded by the New York State Music Fund and also the New York State Council on the Folk Arts Division, and we were really grateful for their support. In 2001, I first began working with a small group of 10 DiDinga youth to facilitate public programming of their traditional dances and songs. And the first event was coordinated at the Thompson Memorial AME Church in Auburn, New York. It's a small city about 30 miles from Syracuse, where I had a relationship with the Schweinfurth Memorial Arts Center, as well as the African American community there. The center provided funding for the DiDinga, and the AME Church offered their church grounds. And although the young men had not performed traditional dances and songs at that point for more than a decade, and this was their first time performing out of context in the United States, the audience was absolutely stunned by the power, the authenticity of their performance. As a matter of fact, one of the people in the audience said to me, I feel they transported themselves back to Sudan and they took me with them. So if we could just see that. Okay, I'm going to ask Benjamin. There's three different types of songs the young men were singing, and of course this is Benjamin's culture, so I'm going to let him tell you briefly the three different, maybe what they're about. Just summarize those.
The first one is a marking song, actually. It's marking out all those people in the community that are too lazy to do their job and to cultivate their garden. And when the harvest is ready, they go steal from those who are struggling during their harvest. So it's a marking song. First one. The second one was. Second one, yeah, and the second one was is a kind of an abusive song, and it's talk about this guy who misbehaved and went to date this other person wife, while the owner was somewhere else. So yeah, so this guy just went and misbehaved, and so it's like an abusive song about his bad behavior, and people are just so like I was saying, Nyakoro is like it's how people communicate in a like when you see something bad, somebody will compose a song about you, probably mock you, So it's how we communicate. And the third one was it's a little bit political, and I'm not gonna go into that. And, yeah, it's just it's about all these political cultural things that we do experience down there, and it's a way too political. Yeah.
Protest song, yeah.
It's a protest in other words.
Thank you, Benjamin. Great. After Benjamin had not yet arrived in Syracuse. This was 2002, and the group was smaller, probably half of what it is today. And I needed a little help presenting these traditions, and the young men perhaps needed a little help on how to self-present. And I didn't really feel comfortable that I should be presenting the young men from Africa to the AME church audience. It just didn't seem like that was the right way to go about that. So I did locate several DiDinga adults living in other parts of the United States, and with some funding, once again, from the New York State Council on the Arts, Folk Arts Division, I invited those elders to come to Syracuse and Auburn to perform with this small DiDinga group there. And the visiting elders' comments were very interesting because they were impressed by the fact that these young men living alone, cut off for so long from adults in their community, were performing these songs and dances so accurately from memory. But at the same time, the men seemed to be unsure about the history of these songs and dances, or perhaps the meaning of those songs. And of course we know that traditions have different meanings for different people, but this was an important coming together for these young men because they understood these songs from the perspective of DiDinga children, because they had been separated from adults at the ages of 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. But what was really wonderful is, for me and the audiences there, was that we were witness to this very important intergenerational teaching moment, if you want to call that, or exchange taking place. Could we show the performance with the visiting elders? It's about a 2-minute clip. Now this song I find remarkable. It has more than one meaning. It's Tolet, about the sausage tree, which has very huge, as you explained, Benjamin, plums, fruit about this big. I think you told me they weigh about 30 pounds each. And maybe you could explain this song metaphorically.
Okay, it's about this tree. Probably it's a tropical tree, actually, whereby they bear fruit this size. This fruit was actually located. Most of the time they grow along the valley, like where they like along the river. So with a metaphor kind of meaning, it was about this guy who somebody was just laying down on trying to take a like was doing hot weather or something, and he just went and lay down there and tried to, under the tree to get like the under the shade, right? And so for some reason this fruit just fell and hit the guy, and the guy died because it's like this it's too heavy. And so the thing is, people do compose songs. They try to connect to, they try to draw a meaning that the nature can protect them regardless of the situation, because this person who got hit was from other tribe trying to come and attack the community. So they composed this song that, regardless of whatever, the nature can still take its course to protect them. And, the tree just fell down and killed this person. And so the song it's a little, it's more political, but metaphorically that's the meaning of it.
The DiDinga group in Syracuse has now grown beyond the initial 10 men, and there's now about 30 young men and women in Syracuse. And some are now married, and they have children. And I've also been working with the Dinka young adults but they have the additional benefit that the DiDinga do not. The Dinka have the support from the larger Sudanese Dinka community of over 600 people. But the young men and young women who came here as lost boys and young girls have also been empowered through public performances for new audiences. And this is not a one-way street. Public performances expose audiences to unfamiliar art forms, and they increase their mainstream acceptance and foster an understanding of different cultures. And these performances also benefit new immigrants like the DiDinga by bolstering their self-esteem, increasing family stability, building a sense of community, and ultimately easing their integration into American society. And in April, this past April, the two groups, both Dinka and DiDinga, performed their two separate traditions at Syracuse University. And these performances enabled them to communicate to Americans that we have two distinct cultures. These are the dances that are associated with our culture, and Americans could actually see and understand that. And it also enabled the young people to act as harbingers of social change. We are coming together here in Syracuse because the Dinka and DiDinga have in the past, there has been intertribal conflict in Sudan. These young people are becoming more confident about their ability to participate in American society while at the same time maintaining a meaningful transnational identity, and they're not so isolated and alienated from the rest of American society. My work as a folk arts consultant I need to mention, has brought me in contact with several other groups of disenfranchised peoples who are refugees from many different countries: Bhutan, Bosnia, Burma, Democratic Republic of Congo, Kosovo, Liberia, Russia, and of course Sudan. And working with refugees while they are still experiencing culture shock is challenging. It's time intensive and not without risks. As a field worker, I've made mistakes because my unfamiliarity with so many diverse cultures from around the globe. But I have to tell you that newcomers have been very, very patient when I ask them to teach me what I need to know about their traditions. They're very willing to help me. In other words, Benjamin is my teacher, and I'm his student. And then in turn, as an American, I can facilitate the bridges that connect to other Americans. In 2007, the DiDinga participated in a community program with Karen immigrants from Burma and Meskhetian Turks from Russia. Both of these groups are also recent refugees that now live in Syracuse, and we'll show you about a minute clip of that. I find this especially interesting and fascinating. I'm going to have Benjamin explain this.
That one right there is actually, I would say it's a war song, whereby people are encouraged like it's actually from a different community, but basically the meaning of the song is a war song, whereby the young men, those vital young men are encouraged to protect the community. Actually, in my place, they normally come up with these tribal clashes whereby young men will organize the group and they go and raid cattle from a neighboring community, which is something which is not good, but they do it anyway. So the song was actually addressing these other young men, encouraging and praising their work. Encouraging them to go get the cattle from the neighboring, neighboring community, which is not something it's a war song. That's how I'd rather say it. Support, right?
Thank you. What's so fascinating for me is Benjamin told me that this song is sung in Toposa language, and he's not really familiar with Toposa language, except for the contact that the two groups have had. But over time, Toposa words, vocabulary, and aesthetics contribute to DiDinga aesthetics in song. And so, although he knows the general meaning, if you asked him if he wrote down all those words, he would not, this is what I found out, be able to tell you this specifically means this and this. But the sound of it, the sound and the refrains and some more of these words is very important now to DiDinga tradition. I think an important question we need to ask, though, is when do newcomers stop being refugees? Newcomers need opportunities and spaces to reclaim and to shape their cultural traditions if they are to attain full membership in American society. And one way to do this is through public performances and festivals that invite new audiences in and connect newcomers to mainstream civic and cultural institutions. But we need to ask the question, who decides which emerging traditions adequately represent this new community in Syracuse, since issues of identity are at stake here? And this question begs for development of a systematic way to find the middle ground between a public presentation that provides an outlet for cultural expression in a new context, and one that does not impose destructive changes on a group's identity. For refugees, these new cultural practices are politicized when memories of the past are performed in exile. And although the decisions are left up to the DiDinga about which traditions are appropriate for performance outside of the original context, I see my role as a facilitator to help the DiDinga recontextualize their traditions in ways so new audiences can understand their significance in the original context and also participate in the performance in some meaningful way. We collaborated on written interpretive materials. We worked out ways for the DiDinga to self-present contextual information, as well as ways to make their performance participatory for new audiences. But DiDinga tradition has changed in some ways, its form reflecting its new function in the context of the U.S. In public performance, the young men represent dances, childhood dances. They were one time, they played at Nayakorot. They were games. And they now reconstruct paradigms of meaning that employ traditional DiDinga imagery. They construct a collective identity here in the U.S. by fusing historical memories with transnational ties. Now, in my discipline of folklore, we know that public folklore is informed by all sorts of assumptions about things like agency and what is culturally appropriate for presentation to new audiences outside of the community. But there are differing adaptation strategies among resettled groups, and these differences also affect the kinds of cultural activity that persist in the new homeland. In Syracuse, these young DiDinga men and women are active and effective in maintaining their social worlds as best they can in the face of dislocation and separation from family. Paradoxically, they maintain a connection to their elders by performing these traditions for new audiences. Their recontextualized performances enable the young DiDinga to enact their nostalgia for the homeland through dance songs that inevitably reflect their dislocation to the West in a way that demonstrates that the communal story songs of the DiDinga young adults are not merely vehicles for the transmission of oral tradition. They constitute a strategy by which they position themselves not as victims of war, but as preservers of DiDinga culture. Understanding a process called recontextualization of tradition is critical if we are to work successfully with refugee groups. The traditions recontextualized for new audiences can enable newcomers to communicate an authentic transnational identity. Linda Bosch defines transnationalism as the processes by which immigrants forge and sustain multi-stranded social relations that link together their societies of origin and settlement. We call these processes transnationalism to emphasize that many immigrants today build social fields that cross geographic, cultural, and political borders. However, refugees are a particular kind of immigrant because they did not have a choice about their immigration. All immigrants do go through a negotiation process among themselves in which it is the members, not outsiders, who come to consensus about what constitutes tradition and what can be reformulated as the means for identifying, affirming, and valuing uniqueness and personal history in a new context. For the DiDinga, the ability to re-experience what these youth had only been remembering from their childhood demonstrates the endurance of the shared cultural identity in the performance, the ritual itself. It connects them to their ancestors. Instead of feeling alone and cut off from their home in Sudan, having lost all contact with their families and relatives, in performances, they see themselves as the preservers of DiDinga culture. For American audiences, they are proud DiDinga men, not uninitiated boys. They both preserve DiDinga culture and simultaneously forge a new identity. The most important lesson I've learned, however, from my work with many refugees is the need to form relationships, a personal connection with individuals, and to be supportive of their needs. Communities that have been torn apart by war need time to grieve. By drawing on cultural and symbolic assets, over time, a community commits to the present. Moving from one culture to another inevitably causes stress for every immigrant, but war refugees like the lost boys and the lost girls have faced additional stress factors because they come from fragmented societies and separated from their families at such an early age. The first community to which any person belongs is his or her family. Cultural assets like rituals, holidays, language, music, dance, foodways enable communities to negotiate between past and present identities. When the DiDinga draw on their heritage, they are in the process of reconstituting their social existence as a healthy, whole community that can ultimately contribute to American society. Finally, nurturing the traditions of emerging communities so they can form their own heritage-based organizations is also important if we are to encourage civic engagement for all. Mainstream organizations need to consider that trusted ethnic-based organizations as well as informal social groups can serve as civic connectors. An important part of outreach for mainstream organizations is to understand what motivates immigrant community members to become involved in their communities. And we need to ask, how does each community define civic participation? And now I'd like to end by actually introducing you to the traditional art of James Yuot Alak. He's a young Dinka young man in Syracuse, and as a gesture of his desire to be a contributing member to our American cultural landscape, James has donated 2 of his handmade ceramic cows to the Smithsonian Center for its workshops with children who may not be familiar with his Dinka culture. For James, these cows represent his identity as a Dinka child growing up in Sudan because it is a tradition that many, many ethnic groups, children from many different parts of Africa share. As a reminder that he was a refugee forced to leave everything behind to escape civil war in his homeland. And finally, the making of these cows serves as a connection to his past and also his present transnational identity. And I'm going to show you something that someone from the Post-Standard newspaper in Syracuse did a 3-minute video, and you can watch the young men making the cows, and then we'll end here for questions.
My name is Karobino Kangwat. I'm the Sudanese Lost Boys president here in Syracuse, New York. The group is making cows. The importance of cow in our society is that cow is the only way that we can raise some incomes. That's one thing. It also makes us remember how we have been staying back at home and how it can teach you the value of your culture.
Trying to get eyes.
These young men were never initiated. They are well past the stage of male initiation. So what they're doing now is almost nostalgic for what they missed growing up, when the war disrupted their society and culture.
When we are kids also we have the bull. And the bull, you sharpen them, their horns, sometimes they can fight with a different bull together. Maybe that bull will defeat the other bull. That is the way that we make them. When we are kids also, we harden them and then we use them in order to fight. If yours is going to be killed, then you are defeated.
I've been working with the Lost Boys of Sudan for over 6 years. Since the beginning of December, we've been working on a clay cow project at St. Vincent's de Paul Church with the help of feets of clay, and we've been transporting those from St. Vincent's Church to feets of clay. Ultimately, we hope that they will be able to sell these cows as a form of fundraising for the Lost Boys chapter. One of the fundraisers that I worked on with the young men was a book, Not Just Child's Play, for educational purposes for the young men's education. And Barnes & Noble was kind enough to organize a book signing. Dominic Raimondo, who is in the book, came back from Salt Lake City to MC the book signing.
Facing a lot of problems, language, food, and you are there for me.
Thank you. You're welcome. Hello. Hi. Sure. How you doing? Yeah. Get a book?
Got some rich material. Very good.
Okay.
Got some very rich material in here. Hope you enjoy.
I hope so too. My son said he'd enjoy.
Very, very, very.
Nice to meet you. My friends.
Thank you.
Thank you.
DiDinga.
We're going to open up the floor now for questions. Just one moment. What are you're asking about a microphone? Okay, and then there's this one. Okay. Do you want to, why don't you go ahead and you can moderate this, I think.
Just because we're recording this, I want to make sure we can hear the questions.
Two short questions. One, in the food, you were talking about cornmeal, ahat. Can you tell me how corn, which is a Western food, got back to Sudan?
Who told you cornmeal was originated from here?
I thought it was a native Western American Indian grain. Is this the same Zea maize, the corn?
Yeah, the same thing. And actually, cornmeal, the maize thing originated from where? Mexico, right?
Yeah.
That's where it originated. But then it spread. And so cornmeal is actually, it's not only, it doesn't have to be from the maize. Normally they make it from millet, sorghums.
So it's a different grain.
That's just different grain. It's not specifically from the corn. You know?
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Second question is, none of the dances seem to have a religious content.
A religion, I don't know what you exactly mean by religion, but to them, their way of life, I mean, their daily way of life was brought, I mean, this religion was brought to them by the missionaries who just went there recently, but traditionally that's not in their tradition. Yeah.
But I was interested in, say, creation stories, how the DiDinga people came to be.
Yeah, they have.
He's asking like about the rainmaker.
Oh yeah, they have such kind of songs. It's just probably that we didn't see a lot of. If you could have watched most of the video, these are just but clips. But if you go ahead and watch a lot of other songs that we sang, some are there, something to do with rain and all these other things. They are there. It's not that we don't do that.
Thank you.
Nice.
And one thing I learned from the elders also is that the rainmaker is not a tradition that's practiced anymore. That's an ancient tradition. So these young men weren't exposed to the rainmaker and that tradition and those songs and rituals within their lifetime. And some of those are no longer performed in Sudan. However, I do remember Dominic Raimondo and Benjamin telling me that the women had rain dances, for example, and they have to go off by themselves, and they are not to be seen by the young men. So there's also some ritual. There are ritual dances that women perform that these young men would never be privy to, but they do exist.
Hi, thank you very much for...
Okay, I could hear you.
I think it's on. Okay. Thank you very much for sharing your story. I just had 2 questions. The first one being, have you and your community at all been involved in the current political situation in Sudan and engaging in those issues? And I also wonder about some of the tribal dances that you were performing that have to do with war. You mentioned particularly one that focused on war against the Nur, or stealing cattle, and that is still a very relevant issue in Sudan today. And I'm curious about your choice of performing that song and the impact that that might have, not just in the United States between Nur and Dinka, but also in Sudan as well.
Yeah, I know. That's why we be selective in doing things. Like I was saying, the first question was, what was your first question?
Just if you work or if you have engaged.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah. I was just, as I was telling my stories, I was a victim, I was a victim of the war. So just to answer your question, I was there, and I got, that's what made me get out of that place, because it was because of the war. So basically, I was a victim of the war, and just for your clarification, and for the thing you were talking about, the tribal thing I was talking about. Yeah, these were songs that everybody, in every community you go, there has to be some negative things about different tribe, right? So basically, it's like, when they sing this song, it's not like, in other words, we may say that they are promoting these tribal clashes, but at the same time, they try to motivate the community of how they're going to protect themselves against this. Remember, this thing coexists for a very long time, and it's not just something that has just come,
And just to clarify, the DiDinga did not come in contact with the Nuer. These are 2 extremely different regions. So Nuer are not anyone. Now, other ethnic groups that live near the DiDinga in the equatorial forest in southern Sudan, such as the Toposa, and there has been cattle raiding in the past. Some of these songs, they encapsulate a history about conflict, and for the young men who have not been involved in those very long ago conflicts with neighboring ethnic groups, still, because this is basically a young man's dance to attract women, I don't know if Benjamin said that or not, this is a way of just saying, we're so brave, look, we won over the Toposa, for example. So I think that's what, and I want to stress once again that the DiDinga are a very different language group than the Dinka. And before the civil war in Sudan, the Dinka, which are 3.5 million people, never came in contact with the DiDinga near Juba. Well, actually, you're 5 hours from Juba, aren't you? And the DiDinga are only 100,000 people. That's it, compared to 3.5 million Dinka. And now, of course, because of they're all uprooted, they have come in contact with one another.
I actually had a brief question for Professor McMahon. You mentioned that as an anthropologist, it was your job to help displaced groups reconceptualize their culture when they were bringing it to the United States.
Reconceptualize.
Okay,
not
reconceptualize.
Recontextualize.
Okay.
Because obviously in the original context, that's missing. You know, they are now in a new context. And in what way are they going to be able to communicate with an audience that doesn't know anything about their culture? So my role I saw was to somehow explain to the DiDinga that nobody is going to know who you are. How are you going to connect and educate Americans like me? And also part of that I learned by how they educated me. Because DiDinga culture is entirely grounded in orality. There's nothing written about DiDinga. Now, Dinka, Francis Madding Dang and other scholars have written on Dinka culture, but not DiDinga culture. And I was hard-pressed to find any information other than what the young men told me and what the elders told me, and a few articles written by missionaries in the 1920s and 30s. But it's not reconceptualized, recontextualize it. Help them to present in a new context.
Hi, my question is for Dr. McMahon as well. As an anthropologist, I was very happy to hear Henry Glassey's definition of tradition, it really being this non-static, continuous idea. I was wondering how, with your, then as you went on in your talk with your other idea of recontextualizing tradition for then the American audience, wouldn't it sort of seem that, again, these are traditions that are continuing, they are recontextualizing themselves, be it the nature of tradition? So I was wondering maybe if you could just sort of explain a little bit of that for me.
I need to clarify that although my affiliation is with the Department of Anthropology at Syracuse University, I'm a folklorist. My degree is in folklore and folklife from the University of Pennsylvania. So I deal with tradition and traditional arts, and yes, it's all part of the same process. Tradition is a process, it's dynamic. So if you think of tradition as, I wish I had a board here. If you think of tradition as, you know, there's cultural knowledge, and the group has to come to some kind of consensus. They have to negotiate among themselves about, based on their culture, what they consider are their traditions and which traditions they believe can be recontextualized or adequately communicated to a different audience. However, what happens is it's always in motion, because there are outside forces like new audiences that would act on that tradition. In other words, Benjamin seeking to communicate might slightly do something different in performance. At the same time, there are internal forces among the young men themselves that are acting on that tradition to change it, modify it. And so it is all the same process going on.
That's sort of just what I wanted to sort of clarify. And then also one quick question about authenticity. When you were talking about how audiences felt that it was really an authentic notion of being sort of at the Sudan, or in the Sudan, or that they transported them to the Sudan. More of this idea of sort of what did you mean by that? As an anthropologist, I struggle with these words of authenticity.
Yeah, that's a really good question. First of all, I don't believe that anything the DiDinga do, anything that a group does, is inauthentic. In other words, if they tell me this is their tradition, it is their tradition. So I don't believe there's such a thing as that. However, there has been some discussion, as I recall, in the anthropological community that traditions can become essentialized or frozen. And if they're staged, then this is separated from community, and it's just a staged performance. It's inauthentic. But, you know, I have a little trouble with using the words as far as what's authentic, what's inauthentic, because if Benjamin tells me this is his tradition, and this is, in this particular context, he performs it, and he's gone through that negotiation process with group members, and they're all insiders, not outsiders, then it's authentic.
We're just going down the line here. A question for you, Benjamin. I mean, what seems so powerful about the dances is that it's a way of communicating, right? So I'm wondering, in this new context, as you say, are you drawing kind of strategically on different stories that have been told in the past, or are new stories being communicated given living in Syracuse and the political situation on and on?
Yeah, it could be to some extent, you know, like you really don't know. Like most of the songs we be performing are old one. Probably, maybe if you go home right now, you find something new, because every now and then people have to, you know, communicate, and new songs have to be composed, and probably things, since we are, you know, far away from home, we probably, you know, don't know the new, you know, they probably got something new right now, we don't know, but as to what you see here, is these are all things that we knew while we were very young, and they probably out of version right now. They probably are no longer used, but we're just using it because we don't have that connection right now from you know, from the ground. I hope I answered your question.
Benjamin, I have a question for you about when the elders came from around the United States. I'd love to hear an example that you personally experienced of something that you learned from them that you didn't know, but you incorporated it to say, oh, yes. Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I know exactly what she. Yeah, because, you know, most of those, you know, like the guy who, the second last clip we just saw was, you know, some of them were like real people who did perform at home, and they know a lot. They probably know much than I do, and so when they come over here, we do learn a lot of things from them, and because they were right there and they grew doing all these things. What we just trying is to keep up with whatever we have, and try to do with what we have. But to them, they really know the deep part of it, and we learn a lot when they come out. You know, most of them come as far as Canada to perform here, and we do learn a lot, you know, when they come.
can you think of a specific thing that you personally learned?
Specific thing. When the one clip the Fed just showed was actually performed when I didn't came here by then. That was back in 2003, and most of these other recent one we've been performing, it has just been local people, you know, those who might know, and there were no elders involved in it. So, in other words, there's never been like all these other elders that are coming when I was, you know, performing it. So I can't say I learned something particularly from those who are coming around, because we've been doing this locally in Syracuse, and there are no invited people that, you know, come out of. So, but from the video I saw, when she showed me the video about these other people who came from Canada, and how did they explain all these other songs and everything, I do learn a lot of things from them, like you know, like the meaning, you know. Sometimes we draw different meaning from what they, you know, experience, because most of the things that most of the songs are metaphor in other words. Sometimes when you don't know the deep, real meaning of it, sometimes you just know the meaning, the literal meaning, but when they explain the deep metaphor behind it, and then you come to understand exactly what.
What are your brothers and sisters doing now, and what do you hear from your family?
My sister, one you know, one girl baby, and my other one is in Binghamton University, and my other cousin is in Syracuse University, where she's a professor there, and I say where you are, yeah, where you are. So my brother is in he was enrolled in another community college, and he's still there, and so we've just been like
When Benjamin immigrated here, the U.S. government allowed him to immigrate with his brother and his two sisters at the same time, which was very nice because for some of the other young men, they were not able to come at the same time. And Dominic Raimundo, who was, you saw in the clip on the book signing, he was sent to Syracuse, and his brother was sent to Salt Lake City. And as I understand it, Benjamin's mother is still living, and I think you told me she's in Kenya.
Yeah, my mom is in, actually we managed to, you know, in 2005, we managed to get hold of her, and right now she's in Kenya. I talk to her every now and then. In fact, I'm gonna call her tonight and explain to her, you know, the event of today and everything. Oh, probably, yeah. Any question?
This is just a small question, but the designs on your bodies, both men and women, the white,
painting, the
yes.
painting.
What do you use? What is used for that?
No, normally, traditionally, they use the clay. There is a special clay crayon, but here in Syracuse, we use this chalk, the chalk and this body chalk, whereby it's easy to wash it out. So traditionally, there's a special thing. They made it from mixing with a lot of other ingredients, and it's a special clay whereby they mix them. They come up with that.
I assume that there is a particular significance to the various designs that are used on the body paintings.
Yeah, there is actually. Traditionally, it's like a different. It's like a stages whereby you can't paint yourself. Like there's a stage whereby you're not allowed to paint into the design that is meant for that stage. So like. Normally we have like tradition, we call it nyekoringole, and then there's another one, they call it, they name it with this animal kind of, whereby, you know, you see the one, whereby the body paint is all over. That one, if we be seeing their home back painting, that we might get into trouble because at our age we are not allowed to do that. We're just doing it here anyway. But basically, we're not supposed to do that because we have not reached that age whereby, you know.
Yeah, could I just say, they have reached the chronological age, but because, as I said, they weren't ever initiated through each stage, they didn't earn the right. But Benjamin is a young man now. He's not a boy, and if he had grown up in Sudan in his village, he would have earned the right through those various initiation stages to wear the zebra or the panther, the different animal. Those represent their age grade sets, their age sets.
Yeah, so you have to be initiated to be painted otherwise. So as I was saying, you know, we're just doing some of it here because, you know, we're supposed to. It's legal when we go back home.
But they're really playful because they have played with these traditions. They know that this is play, and all performance is play. We know that from Richard Schechner and so forth. And so if I had some on this, some of these clips on the back. Simon, who is really very playful, Simon had written one on the back of his back, culture. He wrote the word culture. So when he turned around, that's what it said. And then another one, I forgot, this might have been Simon again. He's really great. He wrote AKA, and then there was some favorite singer of his, and I'm sorry I'm not up on these young people's songs, reggae or whatever. So he put AKA, and then the name on the back, I don't know. Bob Marley, whatever. So, so they do some of that stuff too.
So you paint each other?
Yeah, yeah. Because you can't paint your back.
Of course. But I mean in the front. Even, well, no, but in the front.
Yeah, you can do that.
Of course. Not what I'm not. Yeah.
She got a question.
Over here, if I can pass it down. Okay. Did you know much English before you came here?
I went to school in Kenya. That was elementary school. In Kenya, they teach in Swahili and English. So it wasn't we didn't speak a lot of English. So it was just basically for the test thing. It was a simple test for English, and it was not much of it was not much English.
And the second part of that is, do you get much chance to use your native language?
Here? Not all the time, because I reside off campus, and most of the time I spend time in school. And but during the holidays, we spend a lot of time with my people. And basically, we even forgot about our own. Right now, we even prefer Swahili because that's where we were raised ever since we were little. But it's not that we don't know our own native language. We know, we speak, and sometimes we keep on mixing. But we know our native language, and we're fluent in that.
That leads right into my question, which is, you said some of you are having children now. Is there any formalized way in Syracuse or in other places where there are large communities to teach your children your native languages, or are they going to not know the native languages, like so many of us descendants of immigrants?
I know it's hard. Like my brother got 2 kids with a girl from Liberia, a different country, and so they're actually having a hard time. Kids are having a hard time, try to figure out which language, what language to speak, and so most of the time, but basically when both of them, let's say, are from the same country, yeah, they try to, it's so hard to teach these kids our language, because they grow up here in American culture, and they go to school here, and it's hard for them to maintain it. But they're trying. Those kids, they're trying too much, so much that they try to teach these kids the traditions and everything. That's why sometimes during our performance, we will bring these young kids to just sit and watch how we go about it.
Among the Dinka community, now remember this is DiDinga community, among the Dinka community of 600, and they came with families intact, unlike the DiDinga. St. Vincent de Paul Church has a small school, elementary school, and so some of the sisters from Africa who are not necessarily Dinka, as a matter of fact, they're not, they're from Kenya, have tried to work with some of the parents recently in the last year or two to set up some Dinka language classes for their children in St. Vincent de Paul Elementary School to teach Dinka language. And I do know at Cornell University, they have started trying to get funding. They started last year for the Karen of Myanmar, from Burma, because one of the needs that the Karen community in Ithaca and also Syracuse has expressed is that their children are not going to know Karen language. And there are bigger communities of Burman from Burma, and that language, I think, probably might survive in the U.S., but Karen is a very specific small ethnic group from Burma and might not. So there are these sporadic efforts just starting, but remember, like the Karen of Burma only began arriving in our region in, the first small group arrived in Utica in 1999. So it's only 10 years, and then people keep coming over time now. They've got a big community of 1,000 in Utica. We have a much smaller community of Karen and other ethnic groups in Syracuse. It's just really hard to meet everybody's needs because these are not big communities. These are isolated groups coming in many situations, just as the DiDinga are very small.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Why don't we move on to